morning. Welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips with me, your host, Anne, and Disembodied Hands Justin, who was a little late getting back to the studio today, so sorry we started a few minutes late, guys. It's okay. It's all good. It's a Thursday. Sploosh fans, is that what you all are now? I'm still, waking up. I'm like, is it morning? That's where I am. Yeah, I could use more caffeine, Crawley. Although today is Skinny Vanilla Latte Day. Thursday is my Skinny Vanilla Latte. I am permitted to have a coffee day. Because so far my guts are tolerating it, once a week. So I'm like, ooh, it's coffee day. I get Skinny Vanilla coconut milk lattes. Those are so tasty. I love coconut milk, though. Some people can't stand the flavor. So we've got a Wyvern. We have a Wyvern. There should be a Wyvern song, really. Hello, Apollo. Apollo Tracy. I don't know. Are you Apollo or Tracy? Or are you both? I don't know. I don't know what to call you. But, I'll probably call you Apollo unless you, correct me. But if you prefer, just let me know. Oh, yeah. I was going to say, I'm not muted. My microphone says I'm not muted. You're just trying to, cut me out today, Pendrake. You're like, oh, I don't know if I can listen to Anne all of today. Apollo's good? All right, good. Good deal. Sometimes you never know what to shorten people's names to, right? When they've got more than one noun. More than one noun or more than one name or of just some weird jumble of lead letters and numbers. And you're just like, okay, how do you read lead again? Yeah. Hello, Otter Mama and Nomad Zeke. Everybody, let's get our colors. I've got my colors out. I just haven't actually mixed them up yet. We're going to do wings today. It's wing day. It's like leg day, only wing day. So I want to get my mahogany brown out, which is more of a red. It's a very intensely red brown. It's 90/70. Sorry. We're focused on the Wyvern, so we're fuzzy if I hold the color up. And then our midtone is more of an earthy color, orange brown. Thanks for random highlighting. See, it makes more sense for you to highlight your coffee in all caps, Crowley, but Yeah, yummy wings. Actually, I was just thinking of that. David and I, yesterday was 78 degrees here in the South Bay, and so David and I went out to eat at an outdoor restaurant. There's actually a barbecue place. And it's not shabby. It's not like Texas, having been in Texas for 17 years, you get a certain standard of barbecue in your head. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, this Texas, and it is Texas barbecue. It's a Texas barbecue and bourbon joint. So it's probably about, I would say it's a clear 7. It's a clear 7, and on a good day, it might hit 8. Which, nonetheless, if you have left Texas and want Texas barbecue, that's not too bad. That's not too bad. And it's walking distance from our house. Yeah, Apollo, it really depends on what sort of palette you use, right? Because, if the big thing is if you're mixing paint, right? So for me, I use a traditional well palette, and I use a ceramic one, which helps, actually, with this. Hey, Skinny! Skinny T says 8 months with Prime even. Wow. It's a real, I always forget to renew my Prime sub, so I'm always super impressed when people have a bunch of months together on Prime. Hey, Bob and Julie. It's good to see you. But yeah, so Apollo, what I do, it's nice because the ceramic is a little bit of a stickier surface, but I use cling wrap. So I mix up my paint, and before I stop for the day, I put an extra drop of water in each of my colors, and I actually put drops of water kind of in the wells around my colors as well. I have water in a dropper that I use. But you could also just use a big brush and just, bloink a drop in each one. Then I put cling wrap, clear plastic wrap, just across the whole palette. The other tip you can do if you've got a plastic palette, which I do recommend getting the ceramic in that case because it's just so much easier to clean and to deal with. But if you have a plastic palette, you could also get a big sponge and wet it and wring it out so it's just damp. Leave that face down on top of your palette. That will also keep your paint wet. The other thing, obviously, if you use a wet palette, then hopefully you have a lid to put on it. A wet palette should be no problem continuing work onto the next day. But where the wet palette is weak is keeping paints at the right consistency. So, it's all what you're trying to do. But those that with the 2 different types of palettes in use in the hobby today, that's really where you're at. I would not keep a wet palette wet for longer than 3 or 4 days. I always like to wring it out and let it dry, because mold can and will grow in your sponge unless you're using an anti-molding agent of some sort. So, and that can ruin a sponge. And if you don't have a backup sponge, then you're like, no, I have to go out and figure out how to buy another sponge. So, which isn't a huge problem per se. It's just annoying. Plus, moldy sponges are gross. So yes, that. Does that kind of answer your question? Were you looking for that kind of feedback? Because how to keep working on a project into the next day is like, it's kind of a broad topic. So I had to think, okay, so what's the problem with that? Paint. Okay, good deal. Yeah, my palette, I recommend it. They have it at a place called Cheap Joe's Art Supplies online. It's a 28 well, and the wells are much smaller than with plastic palettes. Like I can fit my thumb in one. So they essentially let me mix a whole bunch of colors. It's big. They also sell a small one, and they sell one with a lid. But anyway, if you use a well palette for miniature painting, I highly recommend getting one of these. It's just so much easier to clean. Like I did a shoddy clean on this one well, but otherwise it's like soak it in hot water for a couple minutes and then just use a green scrubby. It all cleans up very nicely. If you like a clean palette, which I do. So yeah. All right. So Fire Orange is our highlight, and we're probably going to drop a little bit. There we go. Quindy has linked it in the thing. I take the ceramic wrap off. I mix up my paint and see if it's at the right consistency for what I'm working on. So I just mix it up with a brush and make sure that it's, thick enough. If it's evaporated a little bit and needs little more water, I just add it. If you're on a wet palette, your paint has probably kind of gone flat and sticky on the surface of the paper. So you do want to pick up some water in your brush and mix it up, maybe add some fresh color to it. If you don't really, depending on how you work on the wet palette. Like some people don't mind when their color goes into a flat cake on the surface of your paper. That's how my boyfriend works all the time. He has no problem. But some people like to have a lot of wet, goopy paint on their wet palette. And so then you might have to add a little more. But you already know what you're doing. The other thing I recommend is keeping a sticky note or a journal or something. Some people use their phone and organize their pictures on their phone into folders with each project labeled. So like for me, I keep a note of what I'm using. And if you were doing like a mix that you think it'll be hard to remember, like if you were mixing for the wing color, if you were mixing like 3 drops of that and 1 drop of that or something, or roughly or a 1-to-1, you could note that on the sticky note. So that way, once you know your paint is at the right consistency, you can just look at your note and go, oh yeah, I was working with a 2-to-1 mix of these. All right, I'll do that. And so then you just resume. Like, it is important to stop at a point that's easy. Like, notice I didn't start wet blending this particular part of the wing. I just finished these because, if I had started this but left it all mucky, it would have been harder I would have had to probably paint over the whole thing. So do also know what your, like, techniques are and where's a good stopping point. Essentially finish a section and then stop. Yeah, and then there's an app called Paint Rack that'll help you organize paints as well. There's a lot of apps. There's a few mini painting apps out there, but I've heard Paint Rack is the best. I don't use it. I just use notes. Yeah, I just I use a sticky note, even though it's archaic. David teases me about this all the time, that I love to write things physically on paper. He thinks that's very odd because he does everything digitally, being a computer nerd. But I like to put this, what I'll do is I'll take it, I keep the little card from the project, and I just, use my sticky note to tack it to the back. And then I put the model on top of it on my shelf, which is my storage area where projects wait to get done. And that way I can always just grab it. And I know what it's for, and it's very, very clear for me. I like physicality, though. Like, I like doing things hands-on, old-fashioned way, as far as, like, the notes and all that stuff. It gives me happy. Anything that gives me happy is a good thing in these day and age. So yeah. But yeah, some people will take a picture of their paints lined up, and then, like I said, sort that into a folder, maybe make a note on it, 2-to-1 or whatever ratio they use. If you do a lot of mixing. Over time, I find that we all tend to gravitate towards certain palettes and type and colors of paint. Like, I think a lot of us we probably tend to reach the most for like a set of like somewhere between 30 and 50 colors we use a lot. And then, you know, maybe another 50 colors that we use infrequently depending on the project. But once you kind of get into your groove and you kind of have the browns that you really like and, you know, the reds you really like, you're probably going to be able to start looking at your models and going, oh yeah, I used heraldic red on that because I almost always use heraldic red to start that, right? You know, stuff like that. So the longer you paint, the more I think you get a good sense of that. The more you mix it up, the less you're going to get a sense of that. Morning, Val. Just trying to keep up with the chat. Pasting hamsterlings to walls. I see. Or taping them, rather. Because duct tape is the great equalizer, as MacGyver taught us if we grew up in the 80s. My cousins were so into that show. Alrighty. So I've gotten to the point where I'm not really sure on the fire orange. I think I'm going to use the fire orange for some things. But I'm not sold on it, actually. I kind of like my my orange brown. And I'm thinking I might just try dropping some white into that. Or maybe, since we're using it, some Osirian sand. And working on it that way. I tend to like to mix a lot of the same colors. I don't know. I'll make a mix of orange brown and fire orange. But I don't really like just the pure fire orange highlight. It's not coming up the way I want it to. So I think I'm going to do 1 drop of orange brown. Or maybe 2 drops of orange brown and 2 drops of fire orange. And see if I like that a little bit. And when you're starting in the hobby, remember that the methodology you pick up at the beginning is probably the methodology you're going to continue with. So if you are interested in using Paint Rack, start using it at an early stage in your hobby. It'll be a little easier for you then. You'll get used to doing it that way. It would be hard for me at this point, set in my ways as I am, to switch over to Paint Rack because I'm not used to reaching for my phone. Also, I'm trying to lower the amount of screen time I have per week. So using a Paint Rack, using an app on my phone to do all this stuff would mean more screen time instead of less. So there's all these things that go into balancing your hobby with your life, right? So what works for you, what you tend to reach for, you know, the habit that you get into that works for you is going to be the one you tend to stick with. And you know, keep in mind your screen time if you're watching that sort of thing. If you don't care, and you want really to, and you work on your phone all day, so then it's not a big issue. Let's see here. But yeah, Paint Rack is supposed to be a really good app for organizing your paints, keeping track of what you have, which is really useful when you're in the game store or online trying to figure out if you already have a color. And if you should or shouldn't buy a particular color. So all these things are great tools. But everybody's got their own way of doing things too. So the reason I don't like the fire orange so much for highlight is because even though it looks lighter in the bottle, it really doesn't like really pop this lighter when I mix these two. So I think that's my problem with it, is it's not lighter than my orange brown significantly. And when you need a highlight, you need it to be significantly higher. Yeah, I could see that, Skinny. I don't think it's a necessary tool. I think that a normal color wheel can help you out too. If you use them in conjunction though, that might help you learn a little faster. Let me see. I'm going to get to a decent focus level here on the camera. But I was about to talk about, so the problem with these two colors is they're just too similar. They're both around, if I use my handy dandy little grayscale on my color wheel, they're both around a value of 5, which is perfect for a midtone. But if I want to highlight on these wings, I really need to raise this one up. I did put some fire orange in it. It's a 50-50 fire orange and orange brown, because I did want my highlights to get a little more saturated, a little more intense and bright. And the fire orange is definitely brighter than the orange brown. But it just wasn't light enough. So I also added a drop of Osirian sand, which, if you recall, is one of the colors we're going to use on the belly. So I did that on purpose. I tend to like to repeat colors on the model. So if I'm using this for the belly and it's an off-white and that works with orange, which it is because it's got yellow, so yellow and orange work well together, right? Normally you would highlight orange with yellow or a yellowish color. So using this as in place of white to lighten this color to the point where it becomes a decent highlight is nice. Yeah, I mean, it's perfectly viable, Leeton, I think, right? Yeah. But anyway, so the problem with dry brushing, especially on big flat areas like this, is that it's going to leave a texture. It's going to leave that scratchy texture. And yes, with glazing and layering, you can, you can build that up. Like, you can wipe out that texture partially, but you might have to work a little hard at it. Personally, I tend to just use wet into wet blending if I need to build big masses like this. So instead of doing, like, I'll use it for my mid-tone to shadow blend, and then I'll come in and use layering for my highlights. So essentially, if you're going to come in with layering anyway, you may as well... I don't know. Dan, today is the day that names get me. This is like Master Series Open Paint Competition Award Ceremony Day, where I don't know how to say anybody's name. So essentially wet blending here, that's what I've been using to do this. And then I'll just come in with additional highlights. So because these wings on the upper surfaces, they don't have a lot of texture. And what dry brushing is good for is picking out texture. They've got texture here. Julie's done a pretty good job. And by the way, the sculptors are in the chat, Lee. I'm just going to call you Lee. Leet Onyx. Oh, yeah. Pendrick's got the best combo. I'm going to call you Leet. That way you can feel awesome every time you come to this show, which is our goal, right? But anyway, so I'm going to lay down a coat of my orange brown. I'm going to make it fairly thick. I don't want a ton of paint pooling here, but I do want it to stay wet for a little bit. So using a little bit more paint there is going to do that. Then I'm going to pick up a little bit of my mahogany brown and start smearing it right down the middle. And then as I smear that out into the area that I've set up, I can blend it. See? So there's where it's still a brush stroke, and then it blends naturally out as I kind of work it into the side. And by doing this, I get the quick setup of dry brush without the texture. If you hear of a technique called two-brush blending, that's a variant on this. I tend to just use one brush because honestly, having more than one thing in my hand at once or in my mouth, as many two-brush blenders hold their other brush, is already like a trial for me. Like, I don't have the dexterity to juggle two implements. So yeah, but it's essentially wet into wet blending. And as long as you've laid down a fair amount of paint in your first layer, you can keep working back and forth with this. You can bring back a little bit more orange brown into it from the side. Just always when you add in whatever color it is, if you add in more of your mahogany brown, place it in the center of your darkest area. If you're adding in more orange brown to blend in from the side, like if you see that you haven't gotten a good blend, then always start on the outside and work in. So, and I'm not actually rinsing out my brush between these. The only time I would rinse out my brush while wet blending, because it essentially, takes that layer of paint off the brush that you're kind of using to work with, is if I really wanted to come back in very strong with one of these colors. And I didn't want any orange on my brush. Like, I wanted to pick up some mahogany and really hit it hard. Then I would probably rinse out my brush. But until then, I would just work with it. Because no matter, when I pick up mahogany, because I've got so much orange paint in my brush, it is going to kind of make it not be as stark. Tay. That's funny. Tay's a good shorten, though. Tay's kind of cute and snappy. So yeah, so I liked using wet blending to set up big broad areas like this. I really don't like dry brushing because it gives me a texture that then I have to hide. So essentially, it's kind of working against me there. What I tend to do, Leet, is I totally go for the lazy. So I want to save myself work, right? I want to be able to spend more time doing the parts of the model that I really enjoy doing. And setting up base coats is not that. So essentially, if I dry brush, that just gives me even more work. And I tend to I just tend not to like it. Now, there was a guy I knew in college who was so good at dry brushing that he could do it fine enough that the texture would be so minimized that when he put a wash over the top, it would almost go almost invisible. And he was doing lizard men anyway, so it worked, right? The little tiny bit of texture actually worked on lizard man wings and hides and stuff. So you can make it work if you really like dry brushing, and if you're good at it, like, embrace the tool you're good at for sure, right? But also, if you're not, like, if you're okay at it, but you're, like, still looking around, like, make sure that you remember there are other techniques out there. If the surface you're working on would benefit from that sort of lightweight texture, then by all means, then go back, use dry brushing. Like, there are techniques for weathering tanks and aircraft that rely on dry brushing to produce that very light pebbled texture that kind of simulates like dirt and dust accumulation on the surface of a vehicle. So dry brushing is definitely a valid technique. Just remember its upsides and its downsides. It's going to produce that texture no matter how good you are. Even the best dry brusher is going to produce a bit of texture because that's just the nature of the beast. It's what it does. So if you're going for more of a smooth thing and you want to work up from it, I highly recommend going with the wet blend technique that I'm using on these wings. I tend to always use wet blending to start out wings, and just work up from there because it just sets everything up so quickly and so easily. That's true of every username in the existence, right? My username sounded cool until it didn't. I love it. That's awesome. Well, you're elite now. No pressure. But yeah, so always, I mean, with any technique or tool, everything you do is going to have like strong points and weak points. Like layering has strong points in that you can use it to get a variety of textures or smoothness, but its weak point is that it's slow, I would say. And its other weak point, although that can also be a strong point depending on your mindset, its other weak point is that it takes a while to kind of tune it in and master it. Although that can be true of so many different techniques, right? Even dry brushing. When you start out dry brushing, you tend to suck, and then you get the like right, weight of paint and dryness, and you get it. But layering definitely takes more time. So if I'm reaching for speed, I go for the setup with the wet blend. See how and you're able to, you don't have to wet blend big areas. See, I'm doing these little wrinkles now. And because these are so fine and narrow, I don't even need that great of a blend. I just need to kind of suggest it. So really what it comes down to, and I guess this is a good time for a Patreon plug, because patreon.com/paintingbig is my Patreon. And I have a free thing over there, Lead. It's a list of techniques and the order to kind of learn them in that I have found helpful. It's usually the order that I will teach people. But it'll give you a listing of the techniques, explain what they are, and tell you why they're valuable. And it kind of puts them in order, and it goes from mechanical techniques like washing, dry brushing, layering, to like, the wet blending, and then to conceptual techniques like object source lighting and non-metallic metals and stuff like that. So it can be a good, it's a free PDF, and patreon.com/paintingbig. And it's a good way to kind of like just get a list of techniques that you might want to maybe Google, right? And find some videos on. Hey, Lord Nobody. Hello, Dogfather. Thank you, Quindy, for the plug. Also, I just put up a public post about what I'm planning for my Patreon, guys. So there's some stuff coming up, so you might want to go over and read it. And like I said, public post, so it's free. I do try to put up free stuff from time to time. And of course, this stream on Reaper every weekday morning is also free. 'Cause awesome. So I just wanted to get a little bit of a blend. So when you get, I was going to talk about this when we get down to the underbelly, which is going to be a very different color. But you've got a couple of choices on dragons and lizards and things and snakes and things like this that tend to have a different colored underbelly. You can go really stark and dramatic and pretty much just do a very contrasting color on the underbelly and just leave this harsh line. Or you could try to maybe suggest that there's a little bit of a bleed of color or blending, like I was just doing here. I was grabbing a little bit of my mahogany and kind of thinned down and kind of suggesting that that color comes out so that the transition from the arms here into the wing membranes isn't quite so harsh. And that's totally up to you. Both techniques are valid in nature. The other thing that you can do is use a pattern. So I was actually thinking about doing this, is taking some of this red to make little spots going onto the throat here on the underside. And that's another way you can transition if you don't want an abrupt transition, but you can bring some of that color into that area. So when painting things like this, I mean, you will get usually some kind of transition. Cool, thanks, Leet. There's also a free PDF on there that I did for Reaper. So if you're kind of in the point where you're working with layering, I did do a how much to thin your paint for Master Series paint. Thinning MSP paint is what it's called. There's a free video on Reaper's YouTube. Then there's also the handout that goes with it on my Patreon, so you can snag that if you're ever going to watch that video. It's a class I did for ReaperCon last year when we did ReaperCon online. And if you are looking at getting into using MSPs, I created them. So I decided to do that video because a lot of people want to know, how much do I thin to do these various techniques and stuff like that. So, because it is a little bit different than a lot of other paint brands. It's not quite as goopy. It's not as thick out of the gate. So, but yeah, there's a lot of free. I mean, all of the past episodes of this show are also up on the Reaper YouTube. So there's a ton of digressions and us talking about cooking and food, but there's also a lot of valuable information. I really wanted to start getting some purple in here. Let me get my Kraken ink here. And Quindy there's Quindy with the YouTube watch video. So yeah, so that's a class I did for ReaperCon last year. And it talks about how much to thin your MSP paints for like layering, glazing, all that sort of thing. It's generally a working with MSP paint, like general tutorial. And I think it's helpful if you're coming over, especially from using a different brand, or if you're starting to paint again after a long break and you're used to working with maybe old brands that had a different consistency. So I'm gonna hit a 2-to-1 on this Kraken ink. This is our purple shadow. I was looking at it and I was a little bit dissatisfied that I wasn't seeing the purple as much. So one thing I thought I might do is add in a little bit of white. But yeah, there's a crap ton of great resources on the Reaper YouTube. And if you're interested in a particular model, like if you see like one of my sessions and I'm working on a vampire or working on, something that you're like, ooh, I want to know, how you painted that, you can search by that item number and find all the videos on that topic. When we first started this show, Kraken ink makes a very pretty purple when you add white. Actually, I added a little bit of Osirian sand, so it muted it out a little bit. But yeah, there's a crap ton of fantastic resources on Reaper's YouTube. Because not just my show, but everybody's show. Like, all the stuff we've done is there. So it can be a great resource. Alrighty, let's see here. And I want to just start doing stripes today. And I was debating whether I wanted to do black or blue liner, or brown liner, or walnut. I mean, I'm tempted to kind of use the Kraken ink. I just don't know if it's dark enough. I guess I'll try. It is looking black when I put it up against the shading here, so maybe I'll just add a little bit more water to it, or a little bit more paint to it. Bring it back up to more 3-to-1. Sure, Skinny, have fun. Yeah, back to work. That's the problem with the timing on this show, right? All right, I'm going to look up my photo references and see about my stripey pattern here. Let's see. I'm probably only going to loosely base it on my photo reference. So the way we figured out the colors on this guy, as for those of you who weren't around earlier, where's my... I went to the wrong place. That would be the problem. But the way we figured out colors on this guy is we looked for pictures that were inspirational on the interwebs, and this is kind of where we arrived at. So essentially what I'm looking at is he's got stripes on his legs that go crosswise, and that this carries on into the wings. So they don't actually go this way. They actually go kind of at a diagonal out from the body. So if I look at that, so it comes down from the membranes and kind of away from the body. So it's going to come, let's see, let's grab some mahogany brown and mix it in. So it's going to come around kind of like, and it wobbles, right? It's going to give us an irregular kind of line, and sometimes it splits to make a couple of different stripes. So let's do kind of like, so if we do that, and maybe we do that, like maybe we do it like that. Ah, Paul, a cat mount with armor. That sounds awesome. Like total battle cat. Battle cat. Thank you for the raid. Apocalypse raid? Oh dear, that's terrible. Welcome, welcome. We are working on, we were just referencing our visual. When I painted this Wyvern, I wanted to do it in colors that were kind of a callback to like D&D Wyverns, but they're usually really dark brownish red, and I wanted to do it a little more vibrant. So I looked up some Wyvern references, and we found this one, and we really liked it, so I'm kind of patterning. I'm still going a bit brown, more so that there's a little bit of kind of a callback to the original D&D, but I'm also trying to, bring it a little brighter than D&D was. So right now I'm trying to figure out the stripes, which I think I'm going to have to go very close on the upper wings. So I need to get that in line. So I'm using little dots and dashes to kind of like try to map out the wing pattern here. And I also want to link them up at the top here. Just kind of using, I don't want to do an exact like match, but I want to base it on this. So, and we've definitely also got points on that art where these are thicker and thinner in places. So we are going to add that. Green with yellow. That's right. Battle Cat. It's all about Battle Cat. Hey, there was a WoW mount that pretty much was Battle Cat in Pandaria, and I totally got that mount because Battle Cat. He was the best. All right. So now I've got I need to make some wider spaces down here. And then bring it in up here. And do a really close stripey up here, I think. I'm using kind of a mix of, it's kind of this color in here. It's my mahogany brown with my Kraken ink purple. So I'm kind of doing little just spot mixes. You can see them there on the side of my palette where I'm grabbing a little bit of that and mixing it into that. If I was on a wet palette, obviously that would be, this is me using my well palette like a wet palette, pretty much. Yeah, Cringer. But yeah, so I just wanted to start trying out, and actually I did it on the wrong side because I should have done it on the side that I blended on. I'm a dummy! But hey, if you do this, if you get all, distracted by your stream, it's not all is lost, guys. It's not an all is lost moment. It's actually a, hey, we can fix this moment. Because, guess what? You can still wet blend over the top of this. And I will. You may wipe out some of it, but that's all right. You can bring it back in. So yes, I got distracted by the raid. You have successfully distracted me, raiders. Thank you. I have to screw up, regularly. Keeps me in my place. But that's all right, because like I said, it's not an emergency moment. You could be totally distracted by your kids or your cats or your dog or your whatever and do this kind of thing and go, why? Why did I start doing the patterns on this side when I haven't done my highlighting and shading yet? But that's okay. Because as you see, we can still do it. So I've been using wet blending, wet into wet blending to set up these wings. Yeah, that's true, Trek Nerd. But yeah, so we've been talking a lot about wet blending today, using it to set up stuff, you know, what we kind of have been talking a little bit also about the weak and strong points of various techniques. Like layering. Layering is really precise and it lets you, you know, do textures or smoothness, but it's slow is its down point, you know, whereas wet blending is faster, but it can be difficult if you're in an arid climate. And it's never going to give you like a true dark or a true light. You're always going to get something in between because the whole point is that you're mixing two colors together while they're wet. So you will never, like, I'm using like mahogany brown on this, but I will never reach this all the way down to this color. There will always be a little bit of orange mixed into it. So if I want to go all the way down to that color, I will need to layer it. So it's like different advantages. Dry brushing was one we covered, where it's very good at giving like subtle textures and weathering effects, if you're good with it. And, you know, it can pick up texture very easily, but it also leaves a discernible texture that might not be what you want, depending on what type of model you're working on. So you kind of got to like figure out the strengths and weaknesses of the techniques. Like washes. Washes will give you super fast shading, but they will also dirty upward surfaces, which means then you have to go back over those surfaces, and that costs you the time you saved. So then really what it comes down to for me is the effect I'm going to get with this wash, you know, does it have more pros than cons? Because I'll still use washes very rarely. But I'll do a spot wash. I'll do a specific section of the model with a wash. Usually if there's like fine texture I want to bring out and I want to layer it, but I want a kind of a map of it first. So sometimes I'll do that sort of thing. On chainmail, sometimes I'll do a wash. Sometimes I'll just start dark, but sometimes I will do a wash on chainmail to get the darks into those links. So you can use a fine brush and very little paint to do wet blending as well. You can do these little creases here. It's a little bit harder and you'll end up layering to bring back some of this texture, but yeah, and it's all your preference too and what your goals are. Like, I don't like dry brushing on scales because I like to put texture on scales that's planned. But I do like dry brushing on terrain pieces to get like environmental effects, or on I could see that it would be very, very cool on mechanical models. And if I do anything, if I start working on my weak point, which is that I don't generally do vehicles, but on vehicles I could see how it would be really useful, because all those flat surfaces, and you want to add the suggestion of, you know, various texture, because they aren't they aren't perfectly flat, right? So it can give you a good randomized texture if you're looking for random texture. Vithiel. It's totally just like blotted in, but we looked up Wyvern visual references for Wyvern art, and that's what we got. But I don't want to go red because I'm trying to keep the Wyvern more earthy, like he is traditionally in D&D. So I'm not going with this bright red, but I am kind of basing it loosely on the stripey pattern. So I do need to thicken and thin some of these stripes, but that's the inspiration. So having like figured out some ways to do it, I'm now going to just ignore my concept art and just work out from here. And I'll probably fan out the stripes, actually. I'm thinking I would like to do that. So yeah, I mean, I always work from a reference if I can, and I do like to see, if it's a traditional D&D monster, I do like to kind of look at what's out there. Although, as is obvious, I don't mind kind of tossing it to the wind once I've got an idea. I'll just loosely base it on that. And I'm just mostly kind of doing a little streaky brush stroke when I'm doing these. And one thing this will let me do if I want to is I can actually do more of a blended effect and blend these stripes out a bit if I want to. So it depends on what you're trying to do. So like I could even do a blend like that if I wanted the stripe to not be stark. Or I could come back in and tighten it up. Yeah, it's concept art, not control art. Right, exactly. I mean, definitely use other people's artwork as a springing off point, but then, you know, it's not necessarily going to be able to perfectly transition to what you're doing, or maybe you just don't like parts of it. Maybe you're like, I really like this color and this pattern, but I don't like how they did the face, you know? So feel free to switch it up. I mean, just because you're using something as a concept, and I see so many newer or intermediate level painters get locked into this because they think they're not comfortable with making their own choices yet on color. But in reality, you're going to learn a lot more if you just try some stuff. So don't let it limit you. I like that. Let's see here. Putting some intermediate level stripes that are just in the red, that could be interesting. I need to like really watch it. I want to make sure that this looks natural, that it's not going to get too crazy. I do need to put thick and thin areas in it. Which is kind of why I'm doing this streaky thing, because now I can widen and narrow some areas. And I'll probably work with this and try stuff and see, you know, do I like it? Do I not like it? Where does it break down where I don't like it anymore? Like in my mind, I'm getting too vertical here and I want to start spreading stuff out. So I'm going to go way over. Because as the wing spreads, I want the design to spread out. And we'll bring this one out over there. And maybe we'll do kind of maybe I'll do kind of a combination. And then I can bring this in. And then I can bring that in. Now I'm going to just kind of map in what I want. So just little dabs, and I'm going to kind of map in just a few stripes to see if I like it. I could even just start with the mahogany. Make that a split. And then maybe just a stripe that ends nowhere, and then a stripe that comes out. And we can always make another stripe over here. And that leads us up to here, where I'm going to start running into problems with lots of texture in one area. So I want this. So here what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make stripes, but that are irregular. So I'm purposefully leaving gaps that are bigger and smaller. And I've also added in a couple of stripes that don't go all the way out. And that gives me a more natural effect than some of this heavier stuff in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to block out some of that a little bit. I'm going to minimize it. The other thing we could do is we could just make heavier stripes toward the interior and have them get fainter toward the outside edge. That's a perfectly valid pattern. So one thing I can do to knock down these stripes if I think they're too big is I can just glaze. So that was a very heavy, that's more of a base coat. But it does the same sort of thing. So this is purposeful. I'm just trying to knock those stripes a little bit back so they're not quite as heavy, because I made them very heavy at the beginning. And as you can see, like, there's nothing is sacred here. Like, if I screw something up, I'm going to paint right over it. I don't care. Because I just really am concerned here less with protecting what I've already done, but just with experimenting until I find a way to do this that to me looks awesome. So it's about finding the awesome and then continuing in that vein. And sometimes, like with this, you've just got to put it on there. You've got to, like, you could draw patterns on paper forever, but until you get it on the monster, you won't know how it's working. And so you just have to go for it. And what's the worst thing that could happen? You have to paint over it? Oh no. Like, I never kind of get people's sad about that. See, look at how cool that looks now. like where I'm bringing the red further in here, I like this. And I'm knocking out these stripes a little, they're much more faded now. And I think I like more of the reddish hue out here. And I think what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to do a blend. So I'm going to do most of my stripes with my mahogany brown, but I'm going to bring in the Kraken ink, like where it's close to the body. So the stripes will get more reddish and more pale and more thin as they get toward the outer part of the wing. I think that's what I want to do. I think that's because I like how this looks with the heavier lines in further, and I don't like the heavier lines so much where they go out toward the edge of the wing. So experimentation pays dividends, like big time. I'm gonna get my phone out of the way. So yeah, departing quite a bit then from the original art, but still pretty happy about it. All right, so I'm gonna minimize these little stripes. I'm gonna keep just enough of them so I can go over them with a bit of red. If you need to, if you're trying to painting like paler colors over darker colors can be difficult sometimes, but I have this lighter orange that I mixed up that's got white in it, and having put a drop of Osirian sand into this, it's a mixture of orange, brown, and fire orange, is going to mean that this color actually works really well to minimize these stripes. So if I want to make these stripes thinner toward the outside edge, and I started with a thick line, then I can use this lighter color with white in it to really block those out. See how that covers really well? It might be a slightly lighter color, but if I put some of that base orange over it, it's really not going to look that way anymore. And it's going to let me get some of my, it's going to let me thin down these lines so that I can kind of rework them in the pattern that is out here. So these big heavy ones, I'm going to use this lighter orange to minimize. And this is a trick I've shared before, but if you want an orange or a yellow or a red or anything that's kind of transparent, and you're like, well, I need to cover over this other thing I painted over it, but it won't cover. So just add a little bit of white to it. Use that color. And then, because that color is going to be a little bit lighter, after you've painted it in, you can take your original orange, which didn't cover, but it'll go over this lighter orange really just fine. And then everything will match. Ta-da. See, now that I'm thinning these stripes down, I like them a lot. And I do need to remember my wet blends here. So while I've got wet paint there, I'm going to make sure that I bring in this reddish color. Because I like it. There we go. Because I like this transition where I've got this dark part up here down, and it also works with the way that light passes through the skin, right? Because wherever the skin is stretched out, it's going to be probably let light through it a little bit better. So you're going to be able to see through it, so it's going to get lighter, essentially. That's why you paint, a lot of dragons are painted to be lighter where the wing is stretching out toward the outside. This is why. Because physics. Light physics. And again, doing a little bit of spot wet blending. Just to get my transition in there. I want to get up in here and kind of block out a little bit of this stripe. And this one. Now we're getting to the point. I don't like this big heavy one in here though so much. Well, it's not bad though. It's not terrible. It's not terrible. So the other thing that this has done, in all these glazes of orange that I put over these big heavy stripes, is that it has made them integrate into the monster. So when you do a layer of your base coat, it's like you're doing a tattoo. So you're putting a layer of skin over the top of the pattern, and it looks more like it's a natural pattern on the creature. So I'll futz around and till I get something I really like. And this is actually a pretty fun part of the painting process, I think. The futzing. Especially because I like painting naturalistically, so the challenge of getting a pattern that looks right on the monster appeals to me. I kind of like James Gurney, who did Dinotopia, calls it imaginative realism. When you are painting a fantastic subject in a way that makes it look like it could be real. Like it could be a real pattern. Like you could, if you ever saw a wyvern in the flesh, like you could believe that this might be its actual pattern, right? So you're thinking about eating tacos. Is it Taco Thursday? Hi, Mukau. It's nice to meet you. Yes, yes. By all means, follow. I mean, it's Reaper Miniatures, right? So we're one of the largest miniatures companies in the world, and I'm Anne. I've worked for Reaper for 18 years, and I made their Master Series paint line back when I worked for them in Texas. Now I'm out in California with my guys, so I am essentially working for them every weekday morning. I show up to do the stream here. We have a cycle of about 6 different models that we move between. So over time, all of these different models will get fully painted. Unless I totally start hating one and give up on it, but I'm not hating this wyvern, so yes. And the only rule here is that there is no bad question, like there are no stupid questions. Well, and be nice to people. Those are the 2 rules. Also, no religion and politics. Okay, so we have a few rules, but the point is, if you have any questions, even if you feel like maybe I'm working on a more advanced technique than like you're at, ask. Because that's why I'm here. I'm here to help with the hobby. Awesome. Yeah, well then, by all means, tune in. We do this every morning at 11:30 a.m. Central USA time. And I go for an hour and a half. So, like, tons of our watchers, like, they're watching while they're working, but, like, they totally use it as inspiration to get back to their own paintings. So, yeah. And if it's been a while, like a lot of while since you've painted and things have like changed maybe with techniques and, you know, how people are doing stuff and all that, this is a good place to ask questions about that stuff too. All right. Guys, I think I like this pattern. I'm getting there. I'm going to have to go over these dark spots with more red, I think, just to make myself like it a little bit more. But it's getting there. So let's do the wet blend out here on this this area of the wing. And then we can apply what we've learned over here to doing the stripes on the other side of the wing. It's wing day. It's totally wing day. I love wings. Doesn't that look nice? Like, I really like the stripes. I've always wanted to do stripy dragon wings. Ever since I saw Larry Elmore do it on one of his pieces. And I'm a huge Elmore fangirl because I grew up with D&D in the 80s. So, yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'll do that. Actually, now is a great time to do that, Dogfather, so I'll stretch. Hello, Soros. Master Series. Mukau. It's Reaper Master Series. It is the paint line that I created for Reaper over about 15 years of work. So Reaper MSP, that's what we're using. And the key to having it not dry out as you work with it, there's a couple of things, actually. And I can talk about this while I stretch. Yeah, Larry is just good. Like, Larry is just freaking good. I kickstarted his Art of Larry Elmore giant books back when he did them a few years ago. Anyway, so this is a well palette. So you'll be familiar with well palettes from whenever you painted before, probably Moo. But this has very tiny wells, like my thumb fits in one. So it's not as like the big well palettes that you've seen. The nice thing about this is that you can put just a few drops of paint in it and then a bit of water, and it actually makes a sizable puddle. And that's important because the more surface area you have, the faster your paint dries out. So having a tiny little deep well keeps your paint from drying out because you're exposing less surface area to the air. So plain physics. It's physics. We love talking about physics. All right, stretch everybody. If you've been sitting for a very long time, like an hour or 45 minutes, do some stretchies. Make sure your back understands that it is meant to be straight. Yeah, no problem. So pretty much bigger paint puddles. So my average number of like drops in each of these is probably 6 to 8 moo. Because I usually put about 4 to 6 drops of paint, and then I put like 1, 2, 4 drops of water, depending on what I'm doing. I work with thinned paint. Like, really, hobby paints are meant to be thinned, and you get the best results when you thin them. Master Series paint is meant to be thinned with just water. Makes it pretty simple. And it doesn't need as much thinning as other paints in general. We have Flow Improver worked into our existing formulas, so you don't need to use any additives, although you can if you want. That's a big change from like when I started. Before I started at Reaper, everybody was adding additives to their paints because, you know, they had to. They felt they had to get the paint to act the way they wanted to. So when I started Master Series, I essentially said, I'm just going to add Flow Improver in advance, and then you don't have to add anything other than water. And lo and behold, there it is. You can still add a little bit of extra Flow Improver, especially if you're trying to do techniques that are like that are really fine detail where you need very small lines or something like that. A little bit of extra can help. Yeah, we used to have the paint skulls in every bottle, but the problem was that once Master Series started really taking off, it took one of our casters all day, every day, just to do skulls. And so that's essentially you're paying a person's full-time salary for a year to produce something incidental that's free that you're not charging for. So that was not a workable business model, so we moved to beads. Hey, Rax, you live good. Acrylics. Okay, so you mean tube acrylics, Sosaros? Because it's really the same stuff. Like, okay, just as an example, I have been known to paint with these. And these are perfectly valid. This is tube paint. It's made by a miniatures company, but it is tube paint. And I add water to it, and it works very similarly to any other miniature paint. So acrylic paint, people just toss that around. But acrylic is a resin, and it's a resin that is found in most hobby paints today. I'm going to go and do my floor exercises, and then I'll come back and answer more of that question. Because that's paint chemistry. Just give me a second. There we go. All right. So, if you've ever heard of latex acrylic house paint or vinyl house paint or anything like that, all of these things, latex, vinyl, acrylic, and these days synthetic vinyls, which aren't real vinyl, they just call it that. All of these are different resins that are used in paint. And paint, the base of paint is water, resin, and then a bunch of additives that make it all stick together. So acrylic paint, it can be miniatures paint, or it can be tube paint, or it can be house paint. Acrylic paint is usually, when you hear acrylic paint, it usually just means it's water soluble. Hold on, let me see to make sure I didn't... So the big difference between tube acrylics and hobby paint, like the stuff that we use, is the base. And it's often that tube paint don't use as many resins. Like they usually use some gums, which don't set as hard. So the reason you use a resin in a paint base is to give it durability, which is why it started with like house paint, right? Because you want that to be durable. If something hits your house, you don't want it to ding, right? You don't want it to scrape off. If you get hail, you don't want your house to be pockmarked, that sort of thing. Trek Nerd, enamel is no longer enamel. Most enamels these days are acrylics. Like true enamel, probably it's still in solvents, but acrylic enamel is just like the water soluble version of enamel. And the water soluble version of enamel is just a like 100% acrylic resin. So if you see acrylic enamel and it's water soluble, that should be because that's kind of what they call it. Then chances are you're just dealing with like a 100% or a close to 100% acrylic or it's a synthetic polymer that they've made up that acts like acrylic, like that. It's really confusing, the terminology, but yeah, so what it comes down to is that although there are tube paints that now do use acrylic resins, like that Scale 75 paint that I brought up, most traditional artist paints are using gums instead, which means that you can actually scrape them up a little bit easier. You won't notice it if you put them on thick, right? Because think about how paint has been applied down through the ages. Canvas painters usually, when they're using oils or acrylics, they put it on thick, right? They're creating texture. They're building up. They're using texture to give a three-dimensionality to their painting, which is otherwise just a flat surface. But then we come in and we're painting on miniatures. We don't want to build up texture. We don't want physical texture on our miniatures. All of the texture that's there is the sculpt, right? So then you want a much thinner layer. You don't want goopiness and chunkiness or any of that stuff. So then your paint needs to be durable when it's thinned down to this point. And that's where those resins come in. Because if you do that to a tube paint, if you thin it down that much, you lose the durability. Like, it goes. But with our paints, because they have such a high percentage of those resins, that's why they stick, even though we thin them and put them on in such thin layers, because we want the texture of the sculpt to show through, right? Does that make sense? Yeah, Old Testers is true enamels. It's solvent-based. We don't deal with solvents like... There are people who use solvents in the hobby, like James Wapple is pretty famous at this point for doing a lot of miniatures in oils. But even oils, I mean, you can't call oils solvent-based, really, although they're a whole different beast. Oil is different from, like, the solvent type stuff that Testers was using. So, although they're similar in that you have to use, like, mineral spirits to, or turpentine to clean your brushes afterwards, right? So yeah, so it's a lot of paint chem. I could go on and on, Soros, about this, because this is my area of expertise. I joke that when Reaper wanted me to create their paint line, I learned just enough paint chemistry to make myself dangerous. But it got to the point after 15 years of reading articles on this stuff that I would even baffle, like, my paint sourcer. Like, I would ask him for a thing, and he would be like, well, we've got this thing, and I'd hit him with some technical question, and he'd be like, you need to talk to the chemist. Because I almost knew, he was joking at the end. He was like, you know more about our paint line than I do. For our paint supplier. So, as far as the chemistry and why it works. So, it's a different beast because of the purpose. Like, the best paint is purpose-driven. And this is true whether you're dealing with the greater industrial market or hobby paint. So the choices that you make in the resin that you use at the very base, before you even start thinking about color, and later in the pigments that you use, should be choice and purpose driven. Like, it's, what is this meant to do? And then you make your call what you're going to use. So for canvas painting, we need it to build up in layers and be really intense in color. And nobody thins it, so we don't need it to thin. So we're going to make it using this. Miniature paint. Oh, we need this to be able to thin down to within an inch of its life. We're going to start with this. It's two very different things. But now you're seeing crossover. And you're seeing crossover because of illustration. And so a lot of people like Wayne Reynolds, who does a lot of the Pathfinder book covers and interior concept art, Wayne started using miniature paints, Master Series paint, to paint his canvases, because he's doing more an illustrative style. He doesn't want to build up texture. He wants to do the picture, right? He's more concerned in how it looks in print, where everything is flattened out. At that point, building up texture is antithetical to what you're trying to do. So, hey, Robin, almost a year and a half. Nice. Yeah, so yeah, Wayne paints using Master Series, and because of Wayne and other artists like him, because fantasy art is so popular, because so many things use it now. You've got the Magic card and other, like, collectible card market, and you've got all these role-playing game books and interior art. There's a lot of people out there doing more illustrative styles. So now you see Liquitex and Golden putting out fluid acrylics, and that is the tube paint market adapting to produce something that's more like a hobby paint to fit that use, right? Again, usage based. So But paint is paint is paint is paint. When it comes down to water-soluble paint, it's on a range of resins, but it's like the same, you're thinking the same, you're using the same tactics to create it. And it all mixes together too. Like, you can take tube paint and mix Master Series with it. It works fine. You'll lose a bit of the adhesion from the Master Series. You'll gain a bit in pigment pop from the tube, usually. That can mean that it doesn't stick as well. So, but it works. You can make it work. Yes, this is kind of like, yeah, I've had this sentiment expressed before. So every once in a while we do go on a paint chemistry rant in this show. Because I love to talk about it, but that's because most people don't know this. Like, miniatures companies that just outsource their paint line, they don't understand this stuff. They'll tell you they understand it. They'll sell you a pretty good line on it because their paint company will have kind of explained stuff to them, but their paint company probably hasn't explained it all to them as far as like deconstructing exactly how everything works. And I had to learn that to make a paint line that worked. So I listen to, sometimes at shows I just have to walk away from people's booths. Because they'll start giving me a line on their paint and why it's superior, and I'm like thinking, I have a dozen questions I could ask you right now, and you wouldn't know how to answer any of them. Or you would tell me something that meant nothing, you know? Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much like, yeah, I can go on and on and on and on and on. I haven't even gotten into pigments. But we do need to put some stripes on these wings and continue blocking. And I at least want to get the wet blend on there and start and get the map of stripes done on this side. So let's see here. Let's do some wet blending. But yeah. Yeah, you can tell why I gave up being a staff painter and went into the paint department full time. Because I do have so much fun with the chemistry aspect. Like, being a mad scientist, it's my inner soul. Like, part of my inner soul likes that. Yeah, and I really believe strongly about that. Julie said, it's one of the best things about Anne's stream is she talks about the whys of things. I think it's so important for you guys to know the why. Like, back when I was starting to try to do like things like layering and glazing, people would try to give you instructions, but they wouldn't tell you why. They wouldn't tell you the goal. Why am I trying to do this? What is the goal that I'm trying to reach? What am I specifically looking for when I try this? And so I ended up being I think a lot of us were in those days, were pretty much the equivalent of self-taught because there wasn't a lot of good direction. YouTube didn't exist, where there weren't all these online videos. And so we kind of had to just figure it out. And this is not a bad way to learn even today, although it can be frustrating. Like, now you guys have so many better tools, but I really believe that still it's very important because of the experiences I had. It's very important to know the why. To know the why and to know like what you're aiming for. Like, what are you trying to do? Why does this work when I'm trying to do this? Why doesn't it work? You know, why am I having trouble? Like, if you can figure out the why is like so important. And so many people will just tell you something and expect you to accept it at face value. And it's like, and then when you ask why, they might get frustrated because they might not know why. They just know that it works. But I try to ferret out the whys. I believe the whys are very valuable. Like, I've never really been happy knowing, you know, just, oh, this is how it is. I've always wanted to know, why is this how it is? I think that just informs you so much better. And then you can use that information, you know, effectively in your art to try to, you know, to do a different effect, or, you know, if you know why something works and then you know what it's best at sometimes, things like that. Yeah, for sure, Chris. For sure. Oh, YouTubers do dumb it down. In motion, I mean, that's a really, you know, that's an interesting thing. And I'll tell you that I just started, or I'm about to start, it's about to launch on Friday, a kind of a mini YouTube series, just really, really short videos. And absolutely, those are going to be a lot more simple than what I cover on my Patreon. Because, I mean, comes down to it, Patreon is what keeps my lights on. So I have to make sure that I am giving valuable instructions still on Patreon. YouTube doesn't pay me a cent. So, but I still want some of this information to be out there, right? So I'll make use of the YouTube. And I think that the information is still going to be valuable. It's just like if you want the full explanation, and obviously I can go on for hours, then you come to the Patreon. And for many of these people, it is really just I've had some Patreon people tell me to never give away stuff for free. I disagree with that philosophy. I think there's a balance. I think there is a balance you can hit where you are giving people free content that's valuable to them, but then if they want the whole story and maybe even more value, then come to the Patreon. Like, I think that's the healthy balance. Because when it comes down to it, I love to teach. I do this show because I love to help new and intermediate painters. And sometimes even the advanced painters say that I help them. I don't know. I'm dubious about that one. When Derek Schubert or Bryce comes in here and goes, oh, you've helped me, so much. And I'm like, what? You're brilliant. Be quiet. But I think there is a healthy balance of being able to help people learn more about the hobby, and then if they want to take it further, offering them, hey, I'm not going to do this for free, but there's a lot more info over here. It's like a drug deal. Yeah, Dogfather, but you don't have to keep those bad habits. Like, that's the thing. Sure, we all love to blame the 80s. We love to blame the 80s for our bad habits, and it's so true. But you don't have to keep those bad habits, right? Once you get past it, once you see, like, oh, this isn't working for me, this is why this doesn't work for me, then it's up to you to work on turning those into good habits. Yes, it's the free samples. The first hit's free. It's true, Gastoff, and it works. I mean, I will shamelessly say that, in order to continue making a living and being able to teach you guys every day, like, if I had to get a real job, I couldn't do this anymore. So help me keep not having a real job. If you want Anne infinitely on Twitch, then that's your solution. All right, so we've got our blending here, and I still can see my stripes enough that I can fill them in. Oh yeah, analysis paralysis. Get out of it. Just do it. What's the worst thing that can happen? I have to paint it over. Oh no. Like, that's not a heartbreak thing, guys. Come on. You can do this. Get out of the analysis paralysis. Like, I get there too, but even I make myself do these things. Because I just get frustrated with myself. I'm like, I've had this model for ages, and I've held off painting it just because I wasn't sure on the color scheme. I'm just going to start it, and to heck with it. Well, to be fair, I'm still employed by Reaper, right? So it's just part-time. So I do still have a real job. It's just a very small real job. That doesn't... It definitely helps. It definitely helps, though. Sophies? There are lots of Sophie minis. There's tons. We have all the Sophies available from past Reaper cons. Last I checked. Do we still, John? Do we still have, like, a lot of Sophies available? Like, I know we put them up. I thought we were selling them normally now, but I wasn't sure about that. So I think I'm going to start more with red on this. So I'm going to start drawing lines over on this one. Here, let's get a little closer. There we go. Yeah, we still need a Sophie bust. They're in the catalog now? Awesome. Keep Anne from corporate America. Yes, please. I spent so much time in corporate America back in the day. Oh, yeah, you have no idea, Derek. Like, okay, and I worked for Equifax, one of the largest credit bureaus in the world. That was corporate. That was corporate hell. And I was not well suited for it, as you can all imagine. As I speak my mind, nobody in corporate America ever wants you to speak your mind. Like, not ever. So yes, keep Anne from having to get a real job, please. Let's see. I'm just going to do a connected one up here. Let's see. And I want to start spreading these guys out. Remember, across the wing, because we want to start spreading it out big time here. So I'm just gonna try to make it really irregular. I may need to add a couple of extra segments here because I want to make sure that it looks similarly crowded, right? So, all right, this is pretty good. And again, we're trying to like keep them from getting too regular. There. I think we're okay there. Yeah? I think that looks good. What do you guys think? Like, I could be a little bit busier down here. But I think that's going to work. I think those look pretty. Do you like the pattern? Yeah, weirdly, they say they do. Yes, they want your opinion before they hear it. So true. So yeah, so there we go, guys. There's our pattern. We've got it mapped out. So now, next time we do Wyvern, we will come in and refine this pattern and bring it in stronger. We'll do, because I've got so many dashes here that aren't connected and stuff like that. And I want to bring in, you know, I need to extend these. I need to make the lines thicker and darker where they're close to the arm and body, and then make them thinner and lighter as they move away. I like this a lot. So, but I'm liking these stripies a lot. The stripies look good. Yeah, this is a fun one. If you want to work your way up to dragons, I mean, as you can see, he's not huge. Here he is holding, he's probably about, what, 4 or 5 inches across for his wing spread. This is a really good entry-level dragon. You can practice wings, you can practice scales, you can practice the head and the underside, and it's not overwhelmingly huge, right? So really with dragons, you want to kind of work your way up. Otherwise, you get into the Maldorcar, you know, problem where you've got this huge thing that's going to take so much work, and you just get overwhelmed. Is there a paint kit that one could purchase? Oh, Moo Cow, for Reaper stuff, we've got a couple of things. If you want instruction, we have Learn to Paint kits, which are a great buy. There's Learn to Paint Kit 1 and Learn to Paint Kit 2. Rhonda Bender wrote them. She's birdwithabrush.com. She's one of our longtime staff painters, friends, and she also writes excellent instructional manuals. So you get 11 paints with a brush or two and some miniatures to practice on, and her instruction booklet with those. If you just want paint and you want to try Master Series, I highly recommend the starter kit, which is, I think, 11 or 12 colors that are just like a good selection that we put together for you to try out our paint line. So it comes with white and black, and so a good starting selection of colors that you can expand from. I would recommend doing that, trying the paint, seeing if you like it. If you like it, then we've got bigger sets, we've got huge sets, we've got somewhere in between sets. So yeah, Quindy with the links. Can you link starter set too, Quindy? So like Learn to Paint kits, if you get both Learn to Paint kits, you will not duplicate colors, I don't think, and you'll get a decent selection if you did both of them. Or you could just do starter set and build from there. The things to know are that the core range comes in triads. So like there's most of them are sets of 3, and often that's a shadow, midtone, and highlight. And the Bones line does not do triads. They're made for slightly higher coverage out the gate, but they don't do the midtone shadow highlight pattern for the most part, although there are certain ones you could use that way. But so Bones is more individual colors. Yeah, no problem. Those are both very easy price points. The ones I brought up to you, Mukau. You can go overboard if you want, but I always recommend always with a new paint line, buy a few colors that look interesting and try them out. You know, learn whether they fit your style, see if you like to use them, see if you like their texture, how they thin, you know, work with them, play with them, grab a model and play. That's the most fun thing. And then from there, if you decide that you really like them, then yeah, go for it. If you're a beginner painter, then Learn to Paint Kit 1 is good for you because it's dry brushing, washing, and basing. models. And then set 2 is layer up, which is if you're working on your layering, then that's a good one for you. Hey, no problem. No problem, Gwendy. Hey, I just love that you put the links up so I don't have to. Good Lord, no. Yeah, I thought that was the case, but I didn't want to say it because I wasn't sure. So yeah, so you can pick up both learner paint kits and the starter set, not have duplicate colors. You might get a couple of different whites that are very similar, but even our whites have small differences. Or you could always just give your friend a bottle of white. Or you could be like me, and you go through so much white that having an extra bottle of white and black is not a bad thing. Yeah, we love you, Quindy. Thank you so much. I really appreciate what you do for the stream. All right, so we actually have about 10 minutes because we started a little late. So what do I want to do? What do I want to do? I think I want to take my purple. Remember that the on our concept art, the upper part of the dragon's head is dark. So I don't want to like overwhelm all of the red that I've got going on, but I think I do want to add a little bit of really dark color on the top of the head. So let's just paint that in. And we can't see on the painting, but we can assume that it does go all the way down the back. So I'm using my Kraken ink here, but I may need to add more to it. Oh yeah, and an empty dropper bottle for water is really useful. I think you get one in Learn to Paint Kit too, don't you? I thought you got one of the paint kits. I thought you got empty droppers with. So I'm going to add a little bit more of my Kraken ink. When is Kraken ink going to be out as a regular color? Is it out yet? If it's not out yet, then I'm annoyed. Like, it better come out before I run out of it. Or by ReaperCon. And if it's not out by ReaperCon, I'm going to text Sadie and ask her to do a gallon of it. Because I want some Kraken ink. For when I come to Texas. So I'm going to... I think his dark goes all the way out to his snout. And his eye ridges. Just want to do a little bit of dark here. And I'm kind of building it up. Like, I'm not making this big black stripe or anything. But I'm building up my dark. I do want some of the purple to really show through. And I felt like when I did it for shading over here, it kind of just turned out to look dark brown. That's just the way that it works when you're layering colors over one another. You don't always, when it's a dark, you don't always see that color. Oh, good. Layer up comes with the empty bottle. That's what I thought. Yes, good. Yeah, a lot of people use a variety. Like I said, there are times when I will use the Scale 75 tube, but in general, I made my own paint line, so you know I'm going to use it. And I'm just gratified that so many of the rest of you also like my paint line. Because it is very different from a lot of the stuff out on the market, so... But I think that's a plus. Like, if Reaper was just putting out a paint line that was just like everybody else's paint line, like, what use would that be? Instead, we've got something unique. All right, so these scales are very interesting, how you did these coming together, Julie. I'm going to have to actually take a closer look because they overlap on a diagonal, kind of, and I need to figure out... I think it's like that. I need to figure out where my scales are. Get some of this purple in here. Very, very dark purple. Rawr, he says, rawr. One of us. Super. Well, come and hang out on our stream, Smookow. It's been really nice to meet you. I'm glad you were excited. We are always looking for new converts. I mean, fans. And of course, if you get back into the hobby, if this catapults you back into the hobby, then I've done my job. But also, feel free to ask any questions you have as you get back into the hobby. I know it can be a whole new beast. These days, the technology is changing so fast that it can be a whole new beast even 3 years later. So, like, just there'll be some new technique that everybody's into, or, you know, some new product or additive that people are into. That sort of thing. So I'm just kind of bringing in my purple here as a shadow underneath this eye ridge. And I'm doing a lot of the top of the head in the purple, but I am leaving some red. I do want that transition. Could also, you know, use the purple as a bit of a liner if I want to create a shadow here on this big jaw plate, the cheek plate. And if I want to, I can also bring in this area up here against the teeth. So kind of bring those details out. Yes, there are a ton of online resources out there for mini painting. So many more than we had when I started. You guys are really blessed with a ton of tools, right? To help you in your hobby. And the goal for you, your goal as a mini painter may be different from everybody else's. It will not always be the same. I think I am going to take this to purple, though, this part of this plate. So, you know, remember that there is no right or wrong in this hobby. There is only, like, your goal, what you're trying to do, and what you enjoy. So never let anybody tell you you're doing it wrong. If it works for you, it works, and that's enough. And that includes the way that, you know, if you don't do it the way I do it, that's cool. It's all good. It's all about what works for you. And what it takes for you to enjoy your hobby. And if your goals may change over time, like you may start out just wanting to produce, you know, awesome models for your gaming table, and then later get interested in doing something like competition painting. But, you know, that, again, that's up to you. Never feel pressured to, you know, to do a certain thing a certain way. So just want to put a dark space down here. It looks a little weird that I'm not going down on this whole scale, so maybe I'll go all the way down there. Maybe we'll put some significant purple on the back of this wyvern. Because we aren't going to really have a lot of significant purple on the underside. So if we're going to have purple on this model, we know how important that is to Anne. Then we should put it in here. Yeah, White Dwarf was what got me interested in competition painting. When I was working at the game store and saw all the cool stuff that people were entering in Golden Demon. That was what started it. That was the first time that I looked at miniatures and realized they could be art. And because I was an art student, that seriously hit the right zone for me. So, plus my competitive self liked that idea of pushing myself to see how good I could get. All right, so yeah, I think that's going to be enough dark. We're going to do the other side as well. But that'll be a nice dark panel, like kind of down his back. It gives us a little bit of variance, especially once I highlight all these little red scales here. This will stand out a lot more. But it's nice to, when you're painting dragons, because they have so many scales, let's face it, it's like, it's just like, you get scale toxicity after a while. You're just like, oh my god, please no more, not more scales. So if you can vary up the scales on a dragon, even a green dragon, I tend to put a different accent color down the back, on the crest, you know, on the underside, so that it's not all green. It helps to, like, keep from getting bored with the project. And it also helps your dragon look interesting and unique. So here we're going to do a dark purple stripe. And I'll highlight it with a lighter purple so that we can bring the purple look out. Is Reaper John stirring the pot again? Oh, don't even. The answer is, it depends, Reaper John. I do not prime my bones. You can see it. Look, bones material. Look, even naked green stuff. Naked green stuff, even. I do not prime. I cannot tell a lie. Do not prime my bones. I only wash them. Oh, wait, there's an exclamation point prime bones now? Ah, yeah. Great. That's very nice. That's a really nice link, the exclamation point prime bones. Fantastic. Good, good, good. So yeah. Yeah, I never found it necessary to prime bones, but many people get excellent mileage out of it, and this is a prime example. Ha ha ha, prime example. See what I did there? And yeah, David's gonna want to kill me today. I can see it now. Oh dear. So all right, we are getting down to the. I'm just gonna put a little bit more of a solid coat here. One thing I am gonna do is I think I'm gonna color the things right behind the horns here, the scale right behind the horns, as a dark purple as well. It kind of fits since you can see a bit of the dark purple above the eye. And it also means that when I make these horns lighter, if I put this darker color right behind them, they're going to stand out a little bit better. So I like that idea. We'll do that. I just wanted to say one more thing, one more plug. I will be streaming on my own channel this afternoon before Reaper Live. We will probably be working on the Templar bust because I'm kind of really into it right now. So thinking that we will do that. And that'll be at 4 p.m. Central Time, USA Central Time. And it is twitch.tv/paintingbig. Painting big. Ah! Alright, I missed some scalage here. Let's see, I want to make sure I'm getting it right on both sides. I still feel like I need to get a little bit down further on this side. There we go. Gotta be a little bit more symmetrical, Mr. Dragon. So yeah, come hang out later if you want to. I'll be caffeinated. I should be entertaining. Oh, thank you, Quindy. Hello, Dirk Plug. Yeah, I was just about to wrap it up for the day, Dirk. It was Wing Day today, and this will be up as a VOD on Reaper Miniatures Twitch, and it'll also be up on Reaper Miniatures YouTube. So if you like the Wyvern and you want to watch us do Wing Day today, I talked a lot about paint chemistry too. Which people tend to like. I don't know if you do, but we worked on it was Wing Day, and we worked on blending parts of the wings, and we also worked on the stripes, setting up the stripe pattern that I'm going to essentially expand on next time we do our Wyvern. So, welcome! We normally start, Dirk, for your future reference, we start at 11:30 a.m. USA Central Time, and run until about now. So, and I do it every weekday, and we have a rotation of 6 different models that we paint. So feel free to come back tomorrow or to go and watch this once it's up as a VOD. Yes. And we do. Oh, Josh is on craft. Okay, cool. 2 p.m. Central. Well, that's good. I didn't know that, Quindy. New show. That's a thought, Pendrake. People will be confused though, because if it wasn't a color. Oh, you came in with Paul. Yeah, that's cool. Wyvern. 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 I said it Wyvern when I was a kid, too. But then everybody around me told me it was Wyvern. So now I say Wyvern. Yeah, 6 different models. We're doing a rotation. It's 6, because I didn't want it to always be Wyvern on Wednesday. That's why, Pendrake. So with 6 models, that means that everything is spaced off a day every week. So that's always a little bit surprising. Brush on sealer's not quite the same chemistry as the liner paints, Crows. But yeah, tomorrow, hey guys, I wanted to show you, hold on. Tomorrow is half work Friday. And so we'll be working on half work, and look, I got her stick. So I do need to do some putty work to blend this in a bit and to fix my little blowout back here. So we'll probably start by doing just a little bit of putty. But I like her stabby implement is cool. I don't know that it would be a great primer, Crows. You'd have to try it. The reason that people use the liners is because they are different chemically from any other paint that we do. And they seem to have a particular fondness for bones and sticking to them. So that's why people always say liners. And the sealer, like I said, is a different sort of base, like different chemically. So I don't know if it would stick as well. Experiment. Yeah, yeah, it's 6. Like right now it's Wyvern, Half Orc, Sphinx, Lizette, Genie, and Monique. And we try to make sure that it's different based on, I'm trying to switch it up based on NPC or PC or monster, or humanoid monster. I'm trying to keep it kind of interesting. So like last in her slot used to be our dark dwarf, who could be really a PC or an NPC or a monster. And so I decided that she was another one. She's a half orc, but she might be allied with orcs. So yeah. So yeah, we'll do her tomorrow. We'll work on some green on her staff, and then we'll work on maybe her hair and her dress. I want to bring this dress up to the next level. And I'm thinking I'm going to do some lace around the neck, maybe? I don't know. Lace is interesting, and it can be very difficult. Jennifer Haley does it really well, so maybe I'll kind of steal Jen's technique and see if we can make it work. Yes, for sure. Half Work Friday. I feel that. All right. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for showing up. It was Wyvern Day. Here's your item number. If you like Mr. Wyvern and you want your very own, you can go and search by SKU on the Reaper web store or by Wyvern, and you will find him if he's in stock. I hope he's in stock. But anyway, so there is your Wyvern. And thank you all for coming today. It was a super fun episode, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I hope that you all have a lovely day. Who are we rating today, Reaper? And exciting new show this afternoon. Yes, that's true. Yeah, Monday's my super productive day too, Otter Mama. He's in stock. Thank you, Quindy. I never know. Like, it's hard to check. Oh, Michael Mortar. Awesome. Fantastic. Yes, new people, welcome. Thank you for coming. I hope you keep showing up during every weekday morning we're here doing this. So come along, learn stuff about painting, have a great day. And I'll see you guys later this afternoon. Bye.